told Paige Ann earlier, I sure am glad I don't have to do this every day, every Sunday. It just would not be fun to me to do this every Sunday. And before I start even, I would like to, I forgot to do a prayer update, like am I doing this right? A praise update that I forgot. I forgot to tell y'all last week, in our family, we've had some good news. First of all, Jace, who has been on the prayer list for a couple of weeks, just came off, got a new splint on his hand. I told y'all he broke his hand, broke a finger. He's got a new splint on and he's doing well. So, thank goodness he hasn't broken it again. So. And the other one is, last weekend, you have poured so much into my grandchildren over the years, and we appreciate it so much. You've supported all of them, Gracie and Lily, since they were tiny. Last weekend, Gracie got engaged, and we'll be getting married probably this coming up summer, and then Monday, Lily got her acceptance into law school at UGA. So the Gambrells had a big week, and so did the Lathams. So I just with you before I begin, since I forgot at prayer time. Most of you, this is kind of a testimony that it's from a personal kind of a testimony from recent experiences in our family. Not really a sermon, so just take it as that, please. Most of you are aware that over the years, Phil has had some health issues, especially with his heart. So I'm not going to tell that whole story. I'm just going to share the events that led up to what I do want to tell you about today. Our most recent ordeal really started because he needed medical clearance from his doctors for knee replacement surgery. And if you saw him walking around before he had it, you know that he really did need knee replacement surgery. So that's what we were trying to do, but it took a trip down a long and winding road to make that happen finally. He had been being treated, and they finally scheduled surgery tentatively for, I believe it was going to be October 23rd, about this time last year. And all he needed was to get those clearances. He got cleared by the dentist and his primary care doctor pretty quick, and then he went for a routine stress test to be cleared by cardiology. You know, as I said before, he's had significant heart history. He had a quadruple bypass almost 30 years ago. Well, it was 30 years ago.
29.
No trouble since then. We thought everything was great with his heart, no problem at all, for 30 years. So we thought it was good. So we didn't expect any problems with that stress test. However, his cardiologist saw significant changes that he wanted to address right then that it alarmed him. And it led us to a whole new set of procedures and some of the scariest few days of our lives, actually. Step one, there was a heart catheterization scheduled there at Tanner. That was the first step he had to take. Afterwards, when it was done, Dr. Kawaja called me into the room, and he was, as we were looking at the images of what he had done, he was explaining it to us, and it really wasn't hard to see. Major blockages everywhere. Almost every artery was blocked, including the grafts from his earlier bypass. And I mean, we were kind of dumbfounded just sitting there. And then Dr. Kawaja emphasized right away the need for immediate treatment. He didn't want him to go home. So the options for what to do were just not good. He said what Phil really needed was a bypass redo, which is a high-risk procedure and is often not successful. But he thought that was, so many arteries were blocked that he felt like that was the best alternative. So Phil was admitted to Tanner that day to be transported to St. Joe's the next day to meet with a cardiothoracic surgeon there who might be willing to do the procedure. And thank goodness we had Shane, who works at St. Joe's. So we had kind of an in at St. Joe's the whole time. So step two, the next day, we met with that surgeon at St. Joe's who said right away the bypass redo was way too risky and he did not want to do it. But he referred us to another cardiologist there who might be willing to place multiple stents, which is it's not done very often with as many blockages as Phil had, because it doesn't address the whole problem. But they thought it was the best way to get some of them open immediately so that then he wouldn't have the complications that could have come along with the bypass redo surgery. So that was a rough night for us because we didn't even know at that point if it could be fixed. I mean, we really didn't know what was gonna happen, but we spent the night and waited till the next day. Step 3, next day, we met the new guy who told us all about the high-tech procedures and stents they had available for difficult cases. He was direct and honest from the very start, telling us that all the blockages could not be treated with stents, and that he was not gonna be able to open up everything, but he would try to get some open because he felt like he could. And the next day, he successfully did just that. He placed some of those fancy stents he had talked about in 4 of the blocked arteries, which did provide adequate blood flow to the areas of most critical need in his heart at that moment. So when he came out and told us that, and Brooke was with me at that time, we had waited all day, so everybody else kind of had to leave, but Brooke was there, and we were just delighted. We called everybody up and said, we're probably gonna be home tomorrow. So it was good news all the way around. Step 4. When he woke up from the anesthesia, we realized something was wrong. So the stroke assessment team was activated, and if you've never been there when that happens, it's a pretty scary thing. So they were activated and determined right away that he had had a stroke during the catheterization and stent procedure. So he was taken right then to ICU there at St. Joe's, and it was kind of a flurry of who was going where and what was going on. It was a little bit crazy. But they did immediately let us have a video conference with the neurosurgeon who would go in and remove the blood clot in his brain if it had to be done overnight. So unfortunately, that doctor was at Emory University Hospital, and they decided that he should be there because time would be critical if they decided to do that. They would have to start within a certain period of time. So they wanted him there. So they wanted him to be moved over there. Step 5. In the middle of that night, he was transported by helicopter to Emory University Hospital and admitted to neuro ICU there. The next morning, the stroke symptoms were already much better. I mean, you could already tell. So we knew then brain surgery was not going to be needed, or at least we thought that. So it wasn't. But when we thought that, we thought, oh, we'll be going home tomorrow. Step 6. What we didn't know was that the medications he needed to protect the new stents and to encourage the process of what they call cardiac remodeling, which is your heart learning new pathways for the blood flow since all the old ones are blocked. To encourage that process, teaching his heart all that what it needed to learn, they were not the same medicines he needed to address the stroke and prevent another one. So it was a constant thing for the next, 5 days. We remained there at Emory, constant medication changes, stroke assessments, echocardiograms, meeting with a multitude of different types of doctors because everybody wanted to tweak the medications just a little bit differently. And so it was just a time when we didn't even really know what was going on from 1 hour to the next. It was just a constant change. Finally, step 7. Finally, we went home with a bunch of medications that were still changing every day. They didn't even want us to go home for 2 more weeks because of the step down in the medicine. But we said, we think we can handle this at home. So we went home, scared to death, and with those medications still changing, but we were so ready to get out of ICU. I cannot tell you what a roller coaster those few days were. So many ups and downs, all pretty much with no food, well, questionable food, no sleep, and limited resources for personal hygiene, like taking a bath and brushing teeth. Like I found out where the showers were, the shower facilities for ICU patients' families on the 4th day. So, but probably for me, the worst time of the whole ordeal was the night of the stroke back at St. Joe's for several reasons. One, just the plain fear of what might happen. I mean, when you hear that word, it's so scary. Just the fear of what might happen. We had to leave him that night. We couldn't go in the ICU and stay with him overnight there, and that was scary to me too. And the 2 a.m. call that they were moving him to Emory, and what that might mean. It might mean surgery sometime during the night. And what the future might be for him. We didn't know if he was going to get over the symptoms or not. And for our family, the whole family. Most of all, how to even pray. And that's the night I came to some realizations that I want to share with you now. I've always believed in the power of prayer. God's answered prayers for probably everybody in this room before. Prayer. There were lots of people, including many of you, who were praying for us and for our family. Two of those prayers from other people stand out to me the most just because it's just stuck in my memory. One of them was our brother-in-law, Lance, who I called in the middle of the night and woke him up in a panic. And he just prayed for us right there on the phone in the middle of the night. The other was Jeff Hughes, who you met a few weeks ago when he brought the message here. Before 6 a.m. on the morning of that catheterization, when we were one of our lowest points, we didn't know what was going to happen with that, if he could even do it. That morning, it was dark, before 6 a.m., like I said. Phil got a text. We were both brought to tears when we read that text. It was a long, heartfelt, very moving prayer from Jeff, even though he was on vacation, and that wasn't the last prayer he sent us by text. Plus, we knew that he and his wife were continuing to pray for us, as a lot of people, many of you, all of the golf buddies were praying for him, my sweet Bible study friends. We just had a long list of people praying for us, and we're both to this day, very grateful for that. So my problem was not that I didn't believe. This time, I wanted a very specific outcome. I wanted Phil to be completely healed. I wanted things to just go back to normal, and I wanted him to go back to normal right away. And that's the answer that I thought I had to have. And I was stuck. I didn't even really know how to pray. So I was just praying. I was just begging God to let him live at that point. I thought about people like, and neither one of them are here today, but I don't think they would mind me sharing this information. Legends and Ann Rooks, who had been in a situation that I was in many times, more than us, more than we had ever been there. Sitting in a hospital room with a man you've loved almost your whole life, wondering if your time on earth is about to come to an end. And you can't help thinking that way when you're in that situation like that. And I thought, what did they pray for? What did they say to God in their darkest times? And then I thought it was so easy for me to pray for Steve and John. What was wrong with me now? Why couldn't I find the words that I wanted to say? Our children were wonderful. They were doing the best they could to support us and do whatever we needed throughout the whole ordeal. Brooke was the bringer of food, and I really did appreciate that. And she was my driver when I needed to go somewhere. But my fear was my own. And what I really wanted, I desperately wanted my prayers to come, and they just weren't. I started thinking about a book I had just finished rereading. I read it several years ago, and some of you may know Treason. It's, like I said, it's an older book, but for some reason I had just finished reading it again. The book is about how we allow other things to take the place of God in our lives. We allow things to become idols, and most of them are good things. We just elevate them to the point that they're above the God who gave them to us in the first place. If anything in your life has a higher place than God, in your mind and in your heart, then that's an idol. Sometimes, usually, I think it's a good thing, like church involvement, your health, your family, even your marriage. That has become your God, if it has a higher place than God. The main question in the book, and this is what I kept going back to that night, the main question in the book that it asks, it's a hard question. It's, what do I think I have to have in my life besides Jesus and what he chooses to give me? No wonder I was getting stuck in my prayers. My focus was on the healing when it should have been on the healer. Paige Ann has told us before, the pathway to blessing and peace is usually surrender. And that's exactly right. I think that's what I needed to do. I didn't even ask anymore the rest of that night for a particular outcome. I said one thing. I said, Lord, help me to trust you. And I must have said it 1,000,000 times before morning came that night. Instead of putting my faith, all my faith and the resting my confidence in my faith on the physicians and medical procedures, I really needed to trust the one who's in charge of the whole thing. It should never have been about getting the right outcome, but in the God who's ultimately taking care of every situation in our lives, even when bad things happen. I'm not saying we don't need certain things, for sure. We need good doctors, medicine, hospitals, and procedures, and that science has provided for us, and I'm glad we have those things. Friends and family that love us and lift us up. I'm very thankful for all that. But above everything else in our life, the overarching umbrella, we need God Himself. We need to believe the promises of God over what it is we feel like we have to have or what we want and need. We should never trade what we really want for what we want right now. And sometimes I think we all do that. Just think about the story of Abraham and Isaac. I was thinking about this too. God asked Abraham to consider to be unthinkable. He wanted him to sacrifice his son as an offering to him. And Abraham did not hesitate. He was willing to take Isaac up that mountain and offer him to God as a sacrifice because he believed God's promise that through Isaac, Abraham would have a multitude of descendants and that all nations would be blessed through him. God had promised that to Abraham years before that. He didn't know how God was planning to do that. And he also didn't know, he had no idea how that would be possible if he sacrificed Isaac. He just knew that God had it handled and that his job, his only job, was just to trust him. There was no idol taking the place of Abraham's God, not even the son he loved. I don't know why God answers our prayers the way He does. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, sometimes probably, are you kidding? Are you just really kidding right now? I mean, sometimes I think we get the old Burger King mantra thing going, have it your way. And I think, and we've talked about this in Bible study before, I think what's closer to right is the Rolling Stones. You don't always get what you want. I mean, if your gospel is Jesus came to make me happy and give me stuff, you need to read it again, all of it, because that's not why Jesus came. Even Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, on the night before He died, praying to His Father, who surely loved Him, even Jesus got a hard no. The answers to our prayers are about so much more than what we want. God sees everything into the vast, complex, mysterious realms of the Spirit, which we do not see because, our vision is limited to our earthly perspective. God is telling a story, His story in the Bible, a story all about Him from Genesis to Revelation, and we don't understand it because we can't see the whole thing. That's why it is so vitally important to read the entire Bible. God's asking us to trust Him when we pray. It's so hard to trust somebody you don't even know. He provided His Word to us so that reading it is how we learn to know Him and to know what He's like, what He wants from us. I saw results of a research study recently that really were alarming to me. According to this study, the number of Christians who have read the whole Bible is less than 3 people have probably read the whole Bible. And you know what's worse? For pastors, it's less than 30%. Pastors who have read the Bible, less than 30%. Pastor Kajan told us a few weeks ago, and I think this is important too, not to just read our favorite pet verses, but read all of it. Because every single bit of it is part of that story that God's telling. It's okay to have favorite verses. My favorite verses change weekly because the more I read, the more I find new favorites. So it's okay to have favorite verses, but be sure you read it all. A lot of people love Jeremiah 29:11, and I do too. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. But you need to read that whole chapter. Jeremiah the prophet wrote those words to the Israelites while they were in exile in Babylon. And the rest of that promise is that they would remain there for 70 more years. And they would not be coming home early. God had a plan for the Israelites, and it was a good plan, but it was going to take 70 years. Maybe I don't want all of Jeremiah's promise. You need to read it all. And also, living as an exile is not easy where they were. They were in a tough time. Persecution was a part of it. According to 1 Peter, we are exiles living here in a foreign land. So we shouldn't be surprised if we get persecuted. But this world is not our home. This place where heart disease kills people, where children are struck with cancer, where winds and rains and storms destroy homes and lives, where people can be shot dead because of their political or religious beliefs, where families fall apart more than they stay together, where even some Christian churches present a watered-down, lukewarm gospel that challenges no one and that Jesus wouldn't even recognize. No, this world is not our home. And in this world, our prayers will never be answered the perfect way they will be when we get to our home. Our prayers for Phil were answered in exactly the way we hoped. We got the best possible outcome. I mean, he's still Phil, but we did.
Amen.
We got the best outcome we could have. But even if it hadn't turned out that way, that wouldn't change a thing about God's goodness. And even in our darkest times, He knows what He's doing as He leads us through dark places. The question we have to ask ourselves when we pray, whether our answer from God turns out to be what we want or not, is a hard one. The bottom line is this: do I believe God has the right to tell His story any way He chooses in my life? Can it be enough just to trust Him and to know that He controls the ending? A few days ago, I was watching my the hummingbirds at my feeders, trying to get their last few meals before they head off to wherever it is they go. It always frustrates me how my hummingbirds just cannot get along. There are 2 feeders, each with 6 ports. So, there's plenty of room for everybody. There's plenty to go around. But they spend so much time and energy just trying to keep each other from the food. As I watch them, they hover and go up and down and chase each other off and come back and hover some more. As I watched them hover and fight, I thought to myself, after all the years I have fed these birds, don't they know I'll make sure there's enough? Haven't they learned there's plenty to go around, more than enough for all of them? Don't they know that I'll refill the feeders with fresh water every time they're empty? And that will even be even better than the water they're fighting over. They just don't trust me quite enough to give them what they need, just like us. When you pray, if God doesn't give you what you think you need, just keep trusting Him. It's only because He's got something better.